Welcome to the Sanctum Secorum Reading Room. Whether you are new to the literary world of Appendix N, a diehard fan of the genre, or even just tuning in to see how certain titles tie into a particular set of role-playing games, we invite you to join us as we dive into the history and influence of Appendix N. We'd like to open our library to you and inspire readers to explore these new worlds. I am Keeper Bob, and with me tonight, my partner in crime, Keeper Jen.
Hello.
How you doing tonight, Jen?
Almost upright, bubbly, awake. Yeah, insert adjective here.
We will go with insert adjective here. Tonight, we're going to kick off an exploration of the women of Appendix N, and we're starting off with Andre Norton. Born in 1912 as Alice Mary Norton, she changed her name to Andre Alice Norton, wrote as Andrew North and Alan Weston. She was the first woman to be a Gandalf Grandmaster of Fantasy, the first woman to be a Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America Grandmaster. She was the first woman to be inducted into the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame, and just a giant, considered the grand dame of science fiction and fantasy. So we are going to kick off this exploration with what I think is probably one of the most important works in all of Appendix N, Quag Keep. Why don't you tell us about it, Jen?
Oh, Quag Keep. I kind of want a sidebar here.
Sidebar.
It's our adventure module layout, right? Get the little sidebar box.
Sure.
I really wanted to start out the season with an overview of all of the women of Appendix N, possibly even bringing in, someone from the Order of Shanna to talk about it. But as is common in most areas of history, there are startlingly few women singled out on this list. 3. That's it. Now, perhaps that's due to their writing being framed or presented so similarly, or simply due to their lack of exposure, whether on the part of the authors or the readers, quite frankly. I see so many women's names on the spine of DAW collections, which is cool, as well as Fantasy and Sci-Fi magazine. But sadly, most of those also use non-diplomes to be able to be taken more seriously, including Andre Norton herself. So with that, trust me, we'll get to the others throughout this series. We'll do Lee Brackett, Margaret St. Clair, Idris Seabright. Well, the last two are the same.
Andre Norton wrote 300 books. I mean, she kind of qualifies. We could do a series on Andre Norton.
But that's kind of the thing. I don't want it to. She got all of the notice, right? There's only 2 other women on this list.
Lee Brackett got a lot of notice.
When you've got the contemporaries like Barbara Hambley, Ursula Le Guin, Marion Zimmer Bradley, Tanith Lee, C.J. Chera, and Zena Henderson, as well as their predecessors, Judith Merrill. I really want to mention Gertrude Barrows Bennett, who is the creator of dark fantasy. Most would add Mary Shelley, the mother of science fiction. And I am super stoked to dig in further to Lady Margaret Cavendish, who's The Blazing World in 1666. Has her noted as the very first female author, or possibly author, of science fiction.
I don't care how good the used bookstore is, that one's going to be expensive.
There's reprints for like $16 in paperback. It's Amazon. I'm not proud.
As long as you don't expect to sign first, we're good.
Eek. I can't even imagine, especially since she was royalty. So I suppose royalty would dovetail back into Quag Keep, perhaps. I'm horrible at segues. All right, Bob wanted to know about Quag Keep. You guys probably do too. I'm curious as to how many people viewing this currently have actually read the book. We've all heard about it, right? So in 1976, Andre Norton was invited to play a new sort of adventure game by its creator, It was Dungeons and Dragons, the game that launched the role-playing game industry. Gary Gygax played the game with Andre one-on-one, introducing her to his world of Greyhawk, where she took part in an imaginative session of world building, role-playing, and fantasy adventuring, after which she returned home and wrote the novel Quag Keep, which was released 2 years later. It's a tale of 7 adventurers from our world who journey to the city of Greyhawk from our world in order to aid a wizard and unlock the secrets of the stronghold of Quag Keep. Or alternatively, from the Library of Congress catalog, 7 strangers, each wearing a similar bracelet, meet and become pawns in the continuing struggle between the forces of good and evil, which pretty much sums up every D&D adventure.
That's fair. Quag Keep there was an excerpt of Quag Keep was published in Dragon magazine number 12 way back when. Made Andre Norton the 3rd member of Appendix N to appear in Dragon magazine. And the book was actually carried at the Dungeon Hobby Shop when it was released.
Okay, that's a nice synergy there. I like that.
Yeah. You know, it's so tough to really talk about this one because in some ways it's like when the John Carter film came out and all the young folks were like, well, it's ripping off from this, it's ripping off from this, but it was the original, right? This is the first book that has, you know, anything D&D or gaming. Not only does it mention Greyhawk, but it mentions, you know, the Kingdom of Blackmoor. Right? It's also the first in what is now a subgenre of gamers get dragged into fantasy realm. I mean, that's its own thing. And it starts right here with Quag Keep, which makes it really kind of fun. It's definitely written from the OD&D perspective, right? Because we have fighting men,
yes,
things of that nature.
Yes, very much so.
And while it is written from that perspective, I would say there's a lot of liberties. So if you're not familiar with the OD&D, don't worry about it, because even after playing a session, Andre Norton wasn't either.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I mean, I was really tickled at the fact that, yep, they meet at a tavern. It's almost to the point where you could call it, from the outside, you could call it derivative or unoriginal based on the subject matter, but I'd say overall it was enjoyable, but it was really, really meta.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, it starts, you know, the first page starts in the real world. I think we're in the real world like a page and a half with gamers talking about being top ranked gamers from having won tournaments at the latest convention. And, you know, the game is getting ready to start. There's these new oversized minis from a new company. And then all of a sudden we're in the Greyhawk of Gary Gygax, which is definitely shows the influence of Libra's Lankmore. Right off the bat, you know,
Yeah.
Norton's Greyhawk based on Gary's Greyhawk is definitely based on Libra's Lankmore. And so we get kind of thrown into this. The players don't know, the characters don't know they're the players. They have these fleeting moments of clarity here and there. But what I love is the way that they are able to determine who is kind of important to their quest and who's not, right? Who's a player character and who's an NPC is all the player characters have bracelets with 4 dice on them, a D3, a D4, a D8, and a D6 that spin and light up, and then they can mentally kind of control the outcome of a little bit.
Yeah, they learn to concentrate on it.
Yeah, they never really, while they concentrate on things, they never really tell you how it may impact the outcomes they're hoping for. So it doesn't grind into the mechanics, but it's kind of a fun little visual of, oh, I think we're about to go into combat. Why? Well, my dice here are warm and they're starting to rattle. Like, oh, look, they're getting ready to roll for initiative.
Yeah, pretty much. There was one notable moment where the primary character fails a save. The dice start to move, and then they're dark and quiet. and he gets I don't know, bewitched. Feels a will save anyway. But I will say I really appreciated the fact that we focused on one character instead of having to go through the point of view of every single person in the party. That was actually a refreshing change compared to some of the things I've read recently.
That's true. So we focus primarily on Milo Jagan, the lawful swordsman, who is Martin Jefferson in the real world. And then there was Nail Fangtooth, the Wereboar Berserker. Nothing says old school D&D like Wereboar Berserker. Who had a Pseudo Dragon. There was like Ingrid, a name that needed more vowels.
I thought elves used a lot of vowels. I was really
right, like Florid and stuff. That was the Elven Archer and Beastmaster. He talked all of the animals, including the Pseudo Dragon.
And trees and anything that had ever once been living. Yeah.
And maybe even not. There was Yvel, the Sword Maiden. Deve Dean, who was the third rank follower of Landrin of the Inner Light, which was a stuffy way of saying he was a third level cleric.
Well, now you glossed over our Valkyrie a little too much. She was not just a battle maid. She was
written like a normal character.
She was the battle maiden. She was also a swordswoman. She was described as an Amazon and a Valkyrie and a spellcaster. So
I forgot about the spellcasting.
A lot of things all in one.
Wait, wasn't the spellcast? I don't think she was actually the spellcaster. We can cover that in a minute, though.
Well,
that was a big scene.
She paralyzed those two.
She didn't. The moon magic was the illusion. We'll get there.
No. The first encounter that they had with the druid in the back there were the two, and all of a sudden she cast and they were paralyzed.
But it was a really
striking scene.
I want to point out, swordswoman, battle maid, Valkyrie, they're all essentially the same thing. Andre Norton does not give her description a lot of depth, but she also doesn't put her in a chainmail bikini, right? I mean, she puts her in real armor and treats her like a real character, which
yes, she's in full plate.
There's Wymark the Bard, who kind of reminded me a little bit of Fluter Flynn from Prydain. And there was my favorite character, to me, the standout, even though he was mostly absent, Gulf, the Lizard Man.
Gulf. Oh, I mean, I've not seen a character's flaws written so floridly and lovingly.
For a book that came out long before the outdoor survival book for the outdoor survival guide for D&D. Boy, they hammer Gulf. Okay, we're gonna take this lizard man who lives in a swamp and needs humidity and heat, and first we're gonna put him in an Arctic setting, so he's near dead from cold, and he's the water on him is freezing, and then we're gonna put him in a desert where he dehydrates. Gulf does not get a lot of face time in the book.
And when we finally
a lot of people helping Gulf along.
Yeah, there are. When we finally get to a scene where he can thrive and do his thing, it's glossed over so quickly. And
yes, but then we find he has magic frog summoning powers, or frog and turtle summoning powers. So okay, so we have our 7 characters who essentially, well, they all don't meet in a tavern. A few of them meet in a tavern, and then they are drawn to the wizard, and the wizard lays a gesh upon them, and they need to go to Quag Keep and determine what is going on there. And to do so, they must first go and talk to a gold dragon, because all low-level adventurers should go mucking around with dragons.
I got nothing. I was pretty stunned by that. I'm like, somebody hates you. They sent you to see a dragon first thing. Nice
and that is one of two dragons in the book. Now, the first dragon, the gold dragon,
Yeah.
is pleasant and is nice, even though a bit impatient with them. But kind of tells them you need to go here. The second dragon, on the other hand, the copper dragon, which most people go, oh, metallic dragon. I play D&D. That's a good dragon. No, we're dealing with law, chaos, and neutrality here. And the copper dragon tries to
corrupted and so just almost engorged by it, or with its own corruption, that it had these little tiny comically small wings trying to lift this big old fat thing up off the ground, and all it did was stir up the sand. It was really entertaining.
But it was also kind of creepy in that its breath weapon was this gaseous cloud that would strip a man to his bones in the span of 5 breaths.
Oh man, that must have been okay. That must have been in the early part. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
So, but the whole thing.
And then we had the pseudo dragon, though. That's kind of a dragon, right?
Oh, most definitely.
And it was described as fitting in the palm of your hand.
And sometimes Neil would wear it around his neck.
Right, and it would just look like a small leathern stole until the eyes opened. And that everybody seems to think in modern role playing that the pseudo dragon is, cat dog sized or something. No, I absolutely adore the idea of something that is so small that a heavy wind could take it away.
And despite being tiny, it's fierce.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the novel itself sort of plays out like, well, it sort of plays out like a session of D&D, except all of the travel portion is played. There is no, okay, and then you traveled 50 miles. No, we're going to travel those 50 miles and we're going to play it out. You don't have horses yet? Well, we better start with a nice round of shopping so you can buy a bunch of horses.
And we're strategizing our plan here. We're gonna spend a day making plans for all of this, and it was just as interminable and frustrating as it is at the table, guys. I can't.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, to me, the beginning of the book through the middle of the book were kind of slow. The pacing was methodical. I'll go with methodical. But when things happen, they happen, right? They as they're traveling through the sea of dust and they unearth the sunken ship that has been there for who knows how long, and they're attacked by the undead within.
And the undead there were scarier than any I've ever seen in a game. Now I say this as a member of the first ed party that Bob ran for 9 years before we got canceled.
Never going to brag that you've got a hit point left, are you?
What?
You're never again going to brag that you still got 1 hit point left, are you?
Insert gestures that aren't polite to public TV. We have actually one of our players watching us in the Twitch stream here. Hi, Dennis. Yes, you'll recognize a lot of these things. The desert will feel exactly like where we left off in Bob's game. And the undead are like nothing he has ever thrown at us before. And I hope to all the gods that he never does. Those were
and so, I mean, for perspective, while Andre Norton referred to them as liches, they certainly were not what a D&D player would assume when they hear lich. They were skeletal figures, but they were fully animate. So you knock their head off and it would roll over and start biting you. And
they were also fully armored.
Yes.
So there wasn't any of the comical pitchfork through the rib cage.
That was a great example, though, of when something happened. It really was going on. Even golf got involved. Even golf got involved, even though it was in a desert.
Because he was needed at the last minute. Yeah.
Nail Fangtooth, the werebore, is pretty much used in any combat to say, oh, well, there's a whole lot of overwhelming force, so he's over there and he is thinning that down to a whelming force. And he certainly does so. But that combat was fantastic. The fight with the copper dragon was, and it feels weird to say about a fantasy novel, but it felt realistic.
Right. It had that really realistic touch where he falls face first into the sand and blacks out. And we hear afterward the recounting of what happened.
Yes. And then using the blood of the dragon in the sand to let that kind of harden and mold so they could help build a shelter for an upcoming dust storm was delightfully gruesome, really. I have no complaints about that. I love the idea of blood-soaked sand being used around the corpse of a dragon as a shelter. I'm just sorry that I didn't think of it before I read Quag Keep, because now I can't use that.
I know, right? I kind of want to make those into the next set of bricks to make a house out of. But there were some touches, while the planning stages were awkward, I really dug almost the video game quality of things like the swordsmith ignoring the characters who have been told that they can't buy any other equipment in town. It was like all the NPCs just turned their backs on.
It's like the creators of Bard's Tale had read this book. Yeah.
Exactly. But
well, and even to the point where when they're getting ready to gear up and they're like, well, we need to go buy things, and they're concentrating on their dice bracelets and creating they're creating pouches of gold. They're creating their starting money. They roll up their starting money.
That was entertaining. I really enjoyed how the party would go to lengths to retrieve Milo's sword, based on the fact that one less sword in the next fight could mean their deaths. They may not care about this character, but they need this guy's sword, just like they did with the lizard man. You know, they made sure to keep him alive because who knows when they're going to need him.
Well, and Nail doesn't want the lizard man alive, right? So we have, that was so irritating, because we go, woman, wait, no. A woman who played a game with one player understood inter-party conflict that well from having played in just a game by herself, that she knew the players at the table, sometimes you get one that's just sort of a problem, putting it nicely, and it's going to pick a fight.
Besides that, anyone who's rolled up a character in First Ed has seen the table of racial relations. You know, this race hates this race. And that was played out to a T in this between Niall and pretty much everybody else. The heavy archetypes and just, there was a lot of alignment based correlation and in their
old school
interactions.
Yeah,
it was law and chaos, and neither.
Yeah, and law definitely felt that chaos was evil, and to the point where like people that followed chaos developed a foul stench. Like seriously, chaos followers just smell bad naturally.
I would actually play devil's advocate on that one and say that to the chaotic, lawful people stink.
Oh, most certainly, right? Everyone's a hero in their own story. Nobody's the villain of their own story. But our primary characters are either lawful or neutral, and they just complain about chaos. Even though lizard people are generally neutral, and it's like, well, you know, one killed a buddy of mine, and so I hate them all, and so we should just let him die. And while I understood his motivation, I understood his motivation the first time he told us, and the second time he told us, and the 8th time he told us, and oh God, it was the guy at the table that you just want to say, you know, we're moving the game. What nights are you free? Oh, you're not free Thursdays? I'm sorry, we're moving the game to Thursdays. He was just, oh my God, he was that guy.
None of our viewers have dealt with that ever, I'm sure.
No, I'm certain. No one is. There's not a section in the Dungeon Master's Guide about dealing with problem players. No, not at all. No, this is a wholly unthought of problem. But so the story plays out fairly straightforward. It's just methodical. I'm sticking with methodical.
Methodical, and I will say there's a spoiler right off the bat on the second page. There's a new miniature company called QK Productions.
Yes, and just like it does, Quag keep, is Quag short for the quagmire that it's found in, or is it
possibly?
Is it short for quest under a gesh? I mean, it's.
Oh, we're going with gesh now instead of Gaius. Okay.
In all deference to your Spellburn co-host Julian, I did a random polling of four Gaelic-speaking Irish people. Actually, technically, they speak Irish, but for the rest of the world, it's Gaelic, and they all agree that they would pronounce it gesh. So I'm.
Well, I will just say that particular gesh. That doesn't even feel right. That particular influence was one that would rival that of Shilba when you are sent out on a mission in Lankmar.
Yes and no, right? I mean, it's one of those things where they're told you must all work together and you have these bracelets. They never question it. They never really kind of veer off from that. We don't really. It could have been that wasn't really a wizard at all. It was just a guy who was really slick and had a decent charisma. There's no real magical forcing of their hand to join.
Is that the one spoiler we're going to avoid? Who the wizard actually was?
The book came out in 1978, so I think we can. We don't need to worry about spoilers too terribly much. Maybe we don't give away the last 2 pages, other than when the book ends, it ends, right?
Well, it was that abrupt.
Oh wow, it was like a full stop at a page and a half. But that's how Andrea Norton does things. She's like, okay, the story's done, so end. And to be fair, this certainly set up a sequel. And there was a sequel. There was Return to Quag Keep. She died while it was being written, so she didn't finish it. I think it came out, I want to say, in 2000, maybe 2008, with Gene Rabe, who had also written some D&D books and things of that nature. It is, while Quag Keep is fairly highly praised, Return to Quag Keep, not so much, but it is a kind of a continuation of the story, so it eventually paid off. It just took 30 years.
I said earlier it felt like a movie script because it was just so almost meta about it. The sense of wonder that the character reaches out to touch the miniature, and it just really grew to the connection of players to their characters, and it was palpable, and that part was really, really interesting. And when they were finally on their journey, it was really interesting. But I thought that it would be even more relatable to players throughout the decades, especially in campaign play. Not so good for one-offs here, but it would really explain, a lot of the current pop culture. You've got Ready Player One. You've got, oh shoot, what was the newer one from Disney? I think the guy. Shoot. I'll think about it. I'll think of it later. But where you're put into a game simulation. So many movies have been made about this. that
Yes. Well, this kicked off that I mean, Robert Silverberg has made like a career of stuff like,
right.
no, not Robert Silverberg, Joel Rosenberg.
Thank
Joel
you.
Rosenberg. Robert Silverberg wrote a different series. Well, let me ask you this: Quag Keep, did you like it?
Overall, yeah. I thought there were a lot of cool aspects about it. And I mean, honestly, reading about the spells and the spell usage really hit me in happy, fun ways because it's not always detectable by others. You can do it without verbal or somatic components. So that excited me. Some of them felt like I was reading Dying Earth. And so it really put that in perspective of the contemporary authors borrowing from each other's style all the time.
Yeah, I can see that. And I mean, and despite its being methodical, I certainly did enjoy it as well. I thought there was a lot of really neat touches in there. I like an illusionist who is successful. First of all, I thought that was really cool. Illusion is generally portrayed as either like overwhelmingly powerful or instantly seen through, and this kind of walked the fine line of it worked until it didn't, because they got suspicious and they would essentially work on making a saving throw, and that was really cool. I enjoyed that. There was the description when the illusionist was in disguise and was talking about moon magic, and just that whole, the moon grants us other powers and magics was very evocative, and really I wanted more. I was very suspicious already. I had already made my saving throw as a reader, but it was evocative. It was really neat, and I enjoyed that. It was weird seeing a druid portrayed the way the druid was portrayed.
The bad guy?
He wasn't a bad guy. He was a bad guy.
I see that because from the beginning, Nail was labeled as both a druid and a berserker. And they still often called him a druid, as they got into the werebore thing later.
Well, they called him more like druidic. He wasn't an actual druid, because even Nail was distrustful of druids because they were easily corrupted.
The primary character described him as a druid the first few times they were discussing things, and then they drop that the minute this bad druid comes in, so that there's less of a confusion.
Well, and he was a real druid, right? He was the I am wearing brown robes and carry like my sickle and my mistletoe sort of druid, as opposed to, hi, I wear a boar skull as a helmet, turn into a giant pig and kill things with an axe. I'm a druid. No, he was a fighting man. That's what he was, because it was OD&D. He was a fighting man.
All I know is that the unknown created fear, and that still rings a bit too true today.
Yes, very true. And Video Cemetery is right that in Roman history, druids were really kind of scary. Well, really, even beyond Roman history, druids were kind of scary people. Yeah. And that has been played out in popular culture, right? Popular culture has had things like the Wicker Man, which kind of draws on things of that nature. But in gaming literature, it's generally very, very different. So when you're looking at something that is inspirational to and inspired by D&D, seeing a druid portrayed in such a fashion really stands out.
Yeah.
You pick up any Greyhawk book or any fantasy novel. Pick up a Shannara book. Even those druids, who are definitely not mistletoe druids, are not vile, sinister agents of death. And so it really stands out in the literature.
As does the fact that there were things that the cleric said he could only do once. Not once per day, but once only. And that was it. that was a really interesting, it made me wonder, did he focus some sort of apparatus into it? You know, was it an object that was a single use only item, that sort of thing? But it was once only could he scry, and he was done for the rest of the adventure.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. And if you look at game mechanics these days, sometimes something's like once a week, once a month. So that sort of makes sense.
Oh, good point. Maybe it was one of the canticles.
But
we could use that for
but again,
DCC.
it's not something you're used to seeing in gaming literature, but in fantasy literature, that sort of thing would pop up all the time. I will summon my power and I can do this one thing this one time. And it's weird seeing that in something that was inspired by a game where that doesn't happen.
Right.
So that sort of stands out. But let's talk about the Druid and the Illusionist and the bad guys, the Keystone Killers, because oh my God, they were. All right, folks. Picture, if you will, you have a party of 6.5. We'll go with 6.5 because the Lizard Man is generally just baking somewhere and mostly unconscious. So you got a party of 6.5 adventurers, and you're being pursued by, it was 4, I believe. There was the Druid, the Illusionist, the kind of thief, assassin, and the salesman.
He was one well versed in the selling of different beasts that were collected.
Yes, the used horse salesman who sold them horses of dubious origin, who the first time they battle him is like, hey, I'm not really a bad guy. It was something out of South Park. Hey, buddy, I'm not really your enemy, buddy. I'm just here.
No, it was Kugel.
Oh,
it was 100% Kugel.
I could see that. There was a Kugality about him. But okay, we have the upper hand, and we lost it. Like every time, and they were just not competent at all until the very end. They posed no real threat. The biggest threat was travel. Even once they get to the quagmire, they find a swamp in the middle of the Sea of Dust. And that was a huge problem. That was a bigger problem that took more pages to deal with than the actual enemy party that was trying to kill them.
Well, you remember the lead up sessions, plural, that led up to our expedition into the Underdark, right? Yeah, it's tedious and nobody likes it. And why are we spending so many pages on this? Can we just hand wave this, roll some dice for me, tell me what we're doing, and let us go?
Although, to be fair, the writing of the haggling was rather interesting, right? Well, these are great horses. Yeah, but these horses are really kind of bound to one person, and I'm not that person. Is that person going to come looking for them? Because if they come looking for them, they're going to take the horse and they're probably going to kill me. But if you still have the horses, they're going to kill you, so you should sell me the horses for less.
We'll take them off your hands and we'll take the onus. Yes.
Yeah, right.
That was
or the whole concept of them riding ponies because you only rode war horses into battle.
Right. I really loved that passage because it taught me something I'd never known. I'd always played with people who said, no, I'm a warrior. I should have the war horse. I'm going to take that. Well, the war horse is what you walked behind you as you rode a regular pony, and you only rode the war horse directly into battle.
Yes, you certainly don't treat a war horse like a draft animal, although technically some war horses kind of are. But and certainly if you're just kind of riding through the countryside, it's not going to be in full barding and armor either.
Yeah.
So again, that gets back to the travelogue portion of the book. Really has its moments when they get to the swamp, and finally the Lizard Man's like, oh look, there's water. This is my part. This is these next 8 pages are why I am in this book. And he just sort of walks off into the darkness.
Distrust. Don't forget the sowing distrust between everybody. I don't know how I felt about the bard. He had a couple of specific songs, and I can appreciate, the pain that it took to play in the freezing cold. But I will give him the one feather in his cap that all he had to do was pluck a couple of notes whenever this bickering in the party started.
Yes,
And
Wymark existed to keep Nail Fangtooth from going nuts and killing Golf. That's why he was there, because Nail Fangtooth was just a horrible, again, not the guy you want at your table. And so to avoid inter-party conflict,
I didn't come up with that negative of a connotation about
actual PvP at the table, Wymark was there like, before you guys come to blows, let me just play a little song, to the point where Nail Fangtooth threatens him, eventually your song's gonna backfire. The whole, you make me calm down, but eventually it's not gonna work and I'm going to kill you. Not the guy you want at your table.
Can I hire Wymark to reset the volume in convention rooms? Because that would be brilliant.
Right. But again, when Golf comes into his own for those like 8 pages, it's actually really kind of neat. They're trying to figure out how to cross the swamp, and he comes back with these giant leaves because he lives in a swamp and he knows these things. They're like, well, how is he pushing us along on this reed raft? Well, he's not. The lizard folk can summon things to aid them. And so you've got all of these swamp creatures underneath kind of pushing it along. And there was some really great imagery there. He was my favorite character, and he was very underused.
So I'm reading some of the chat in our stream now, and I'm really struck by this comment that one review called it derivative stale rubbish.
Oh, that is Return to Quag Keep.
Oh, is it?
Yes, because Return to Quag Keep is derivative stale rubbish. Some of the reviews point out that it suffers from not having Andre Norton's hand through the entire way, that the pacing is off.
Okay.
Let's just say that Jean Rabe is an author in her own right. She is not referred to as the Grand Dame of science fiction and fantasy, and there's a reason for that.
So what should Joan read next after this?
Not Return to Quag Keep would be where I will start. Honestly,
I would say that this book is a good first to be read. If you're looking for the first book of Andre Norton to read. If you're looking at Andre Norton because you're looking at Appendix N, then yes, this is the book that would be definitive.
Well, I mean,
but
this book is not on Appendix. This book isn't on Appendix N until 5e. 5e specifically does mention Quag Keep.
Really?
And Witchworld. Witchworld was her big series. That's probably what she's best known for. So if you're looking for something after Quag Keep, that's a possibility. Or Daybreak 2250, right? It has the famed cover that has inspired Command D. It's that, although that's more of a post-apocalyptic piece. Andre Norton was not afraid to really kind of double down on matters of gender in most of her books, and like in Witchworld, men. So after Quag Keep, Andre Norton, read the original Witchworld. That would be my advice. It's an older book, so it's linguistically going to be different. The pacing is going to be a bit different, but it is Andre Norton, so the ending will be pretty much the same. It will end when it ends, and not a moment after.
I kind of want to go back to one of our one of our episodes of Sanctum Secorum, because we did sword or steel magic, right? Was it Steel Magic by Andre Norton? I don't remember if it ended so suddenly. Maybe it was sword magic.
Yeah, Andre Norton is kind of known for that. Andre Norton will take an entire book, and when it's time to wrap up the book, give it 8 to 10 pages, and you're just, finale, done, out. Doesn't mess around, doesn't go for long, afterwards and things of that nature. No. Andre Norton is done telling a story. She doesn't care if you're not done reading the story. She's done telling it.
Episode 19. And to excuse me, to clarify from my earlier brain fart, it was Free Guy from Disney that just recently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that one. So I'm going to reiterate my question for the viewers now. We all know this title. We all had this vague impression, but how many of you guys have actually read this? How many of our friends have dived into this or remember it?
That's a good question. I know at least one person in the chat has read it.
I see Dennis started it. It looks like Joan started it.
I see a lot of sheepish. I haven't read it, and that's okay, right? Andre Norton wrote 300 books over the course of 70 years, so you're allowed to have not read one of her books. It's okay.
And hey, I hadn't read it either, so I learned new stuff.
She was hardcore. When she died, she didn't want a funeral. She just wanted to be cremated with a copy of her first and last novels.
Wow.
Right?
Talk about defining who you really are.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, and she was a bookseller, she was a librarian, she was an editor, and then she spent essentially 70 years as a professional writer. And it was 70 years, she's talking like 4 generations of readers over her lifetime. And she inspired a lot of other people with her work.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell again by the number of DAW spines that I see with other women's names on them. I think that's fantastic, and I think it's kind of telling that there's only 3 on Appendix N.
Speaking of DAW, let's talk real quick about the forward to Quag Keep, the author's thanks, which reads: the author wishes to express appreciation for the invaluable aid of E. Gary Gygax of TSR, expert player and creator of the wargame Dungeons and Dragons, on which the background of Quag Keep is based. I wish also to acknowledge the kind assistance of Donald Walheim, an authority and collector of fantasy miniatures whose special interest was so valuable for my interest, or for my research. Donald Walheim was the founder of DAW Books, who published the paperback of Quag Keep after it was released, and is considered one of the most influential editors in all of science fiction and fantasy. So
right there with Del Rey, right?
Yes. So I mean,
wow.
You don't stop to think about how intermingled a lot of the Appendix N authors were. Andre Norton was a member of an organization with Lynn Carter, right? The Swordsmen and Sorcerers Guild of America, which was run by Lynn Carter. We've seen, if you look out there, there's books signed by an Appendix N author to another Appendix N author. They were all of those contemporaries, while they weren't necessarily close personal friends, kind of interwove quite a bit. And
they traveled in the same circles.
Yes, especially the people that came out of the pulps together.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot is made of the Lovecraft circle, but Lovecraft circle was not unique in any way, shape, or form.
No, and bouncing back to my preamble, Lovecraft actually called Gertrude Barrows Bennett and her dark fantasy creations spectacular. So the fact that Lovecraft was praising the work of a woman. I was
Yeah.
really
That
impressed.
Lovecraft said anything nice about a woman is
I was impressed. I'll just leave it at that.
But I mean, there's so many neat little things in this. There's there's other monsters that have never been seen before or since in D&D. The Urgaunts, which were some sort of non-demonic reptile things with long necks that were summoned, and there was the Gar Eagles with 30-foot wingspans. The second largest flying creatures in Greyhawk after dragons. It was just.
Oh, that was another great thing. The illusion put forth by the dragon himself, or itself, nobody really said. But the liches?
Yeah, that's what they called them. She referred to them as liches.
Yeah, it was really confusing. It was Lichis for the name of the dragon, but then the lich that they were fighting, the undead, were Liche. That was kind of confusing to me. Because words. But the place that Lichis had concealed himself and just made the entire place look like an unwelcoming post molten lava.
Well, and then once everything is
good
revealed,
for the ponies, no good place for anything, and
but once the glamour is gone, the description of the glittering gemstones laid out in patterns and the soft bed of gold coins, it was a great description of a dragon's hoard, which wasn't just it's swimming in gold, y'all. It's rich. It's Jeff Bezos. Who is, by the way, according to Forbes magazine, wealthier than Smaug from Lord of the Rings. But
you could stop anytime.
but the description was really neat. It was colorful. It was interesting, and that stood out. And I think that's part of what I like about Andre Norton's writing is there's details that stand out. The sunken ship that had the sealed, jugs of the magical wine and everything that goes into that. Just her details are wonderful.
Paxson has a great side comment there. A different editor may have suggested stronger differentiation between those names.
Yeah, but she at that point she'd been writing for 40 years, so I don't know what sort of editor really would have the nerve at that point, right? You've been doing this for 40 years. You're already a grandmaster. Maybe I'm just gonna stick quiet.
Yeah.
This was after
Vance used the same names for places in the same series. He would vacillate between the names he used for a certain place, or he'd reuse the same name for different places over and over and over throughout different series to a point of confusion.
Well, and I mean, from an editor standpoint, I mean, certainly she didn't win the World Fantasy Award Lifetime Achievement until 1998, but that was her third nomination. Quag, I'm pretty sure, is after her first nomination. So, I mean, she was.
All I'm saying is there were 2 years between the inception and the publication.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, if I wasn't, I don't know, say the founder of DAW Books, I'd be I think I would have been a little intimidated trying to edit the grandmaster with a lifetime of experience who has also been an editor.
I guess we're just a little more cutthroat in the gaming industry, right?
So, but overall, now, who was your favorite character? You know who mine was, right? I have talked Lizard Man to death, almost literally, because he tried out.
I had an empathy for that character. Really, the bard was the only one I didn't have any sort of attachment to. Because even though the werebore, as we keep calling him, had his flaws, he still kind of felt like the Fawford of the operation, or the Jean to the Loch Lamora, you know. I don't know. It's hard not to say that the main character was my favorite just because that was the one we got to know the best. But even the elf had a lot of cool qualities. We didn't get to see him much because he was always scouting up ahead. Just like we didn't see much of the lizard man because he was unconscious. But, you know, there's the battle maiden, of course, that's going to, you know, you've got to put the token female in the group so that you have.
Well, you know, I think for Andre Norton it was less of a token, but yeah.
But was it? I mean, it was the only female character in the entire book.
No, the Illusionist was a woman as well.
Oh, that's true. The witch.
Yes.
When the veil completely dropped, it was a witch.
So there were 2 women in the entire book.
I stand by my original statement that there was really only one because the witch was just described as vile and not really a she.
And it was well, no, because in some parts they definitely, before being fully revealed, was definitely a woman, but again was one of the keystone killers, so not really an effective woman. There was one effective woman in this book, but you know, it's, considering the period and the genre, that is one more than most books had.
I mean, I don't want to say that doesn't make it any better, but it kind of, for that reason, it doesn't stand out to me. I don't want to jump on the battle maid was my favorite because it was the chick. No, I actually liked the main character because of his struggle with morality.
Well, I mean, if
the moral issues
wasn't such a bore, his background, right, when he started going off, you know, when they were having that struggle, that identity crisis between the players and the characters, and he as the characters rattling off, you know, I was here for this battle and I did this. That was really fascinating stuff. Again, it's the sort of thing that player would corner you with at a table where you're too polite to say anything and get away. But we've all been there. But the characters all had their own levels of depth. Some were kind of shallow, like the bard, who we got no real background on, and others were definitely, you know, kind of fully fleshed out. And then Milo is also our real world anchor. He's the one that keeps remembering. He's the one that keeps having flashes to the room and the table and the pieces of paper.
That, and he seems to be the one person who can call Niall down. He can remind him of, you know, this is the mission, this is the moral choice we should make.
Well, yeah, but Yvel did that really well too. She was the one that essentially said, you know, sit up, you know, sit down and shut up. You know, there's 7 of us with these bracelets. We know we're bound together. We all have a purpose. And of course, she said, well, maybe his purpose is to betray us. And she's like, shut up. And I liked her forthright responses.
Well, that's true. But, you know, he was the character that wouldn't listen to her anyway. Just as a quick bit of bookkeeping before I say my last thing, Video Cemetery has asked if there's a little more advance warning. I should be able to read the next episode's book, whatever it may be.
Well, let's figure that out right now.
Stay tuned to sanctum.media and we can announce that ahead of time before the Goodman Games blast.
Oh, come on. We can just figure it out right now.
I mean, I there are so many choices. I'm torn because, you know, I want to dive more into the early works of Margaret St. Clair. I really want to dive into the non-diplomed, the Idris Seabright writings. But they're little pulpy bits, and so they're spread out and you can't always get your paws on them. And I don't know if maybe Lee Brackett would be a better choice just for that reason, because most of what she's on Appendix N for is more readily accessible.
I don't know. Let's do. We will announce a title later, because it'll take a little bit of looking, but I like the idea of doing something by Idris Seabright. Because I mean that's a non-deployment most people don't even know.
I would also be okay with just doing an overarching thing if you guys want to grab pieces from Seabright / St. Clair and contribute to the conversation with the pieces that you read and some of the points. We can kind of compare between each other if the same overarching themes appear, shall we say.
Yeah. And Video Cemetery, I'm with you. Having read the Carnelian Cube, I can pretty much handle anything put in front of me because I'm a survivor.
The stress of her regard.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just mean. That's just me. That's not even on Appendix N. That's just mean.
In 5 words, deflate your significant other.
But so we'll do something by St. Clair / Seabright, and we'll get that to figure. We'll get that figured out. I mean, we could cover one of the 2 very well known books. Yeah, Shadow People is
forever since we read that one.
That was episode 1 of Sanctum Secorum. So.
That's what I said. It's been forever.
Yeah, so it might not be bad to do a refresher on that one anyway.
And we've got these bracelets we keep talking about that had dice on them. I'm just saying, people, with all of the LED dice that are out there that you can program with your phone and all that, where are my LED dice wearables? I want the bracelet that shows the die as it's rolling. I want to see the little animation of it. And then here, I rolled a 20 and I can show you. Gib. Challenge.
I admit, I thought the bracelet concepts were really cool, except for there were 2 things that weirded me out. One, it was a D3, a D4, a D6, and a D8, right? There wasn't a D12 or a D20.
There were 5 dice though total. One was
4 dice. 4 dice. 3, 4,
there
6.
There were 5 dice on the table.
Oh, 5 dice on the table.
Milo,
but the bracelets
Milo
had
grabbed
4.
the control die.
Yeah, the bracelets only had 4, and also as described, they don't work because they could only spin. Right? They can't really roll the way they were described. But I bet someone could figure that out. So someone could break the laws of either physics or geometry. If someone could break mathematics for us and create that, that'd be great.
And if you read the book, it describes how the numbers lit up and
they were gemstones too.
And yeah, make it pretty, make it cool.
So
hey,
Jen, so my wife is asking for a bracelet with jewel encrusted dice.
But video, LED, gems, that's cool too.
I like
trying to make it cheaper.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. So I think that pretty
that's
much,
me in a nutshell, right?
I think that pretty much covers Quag Keep, without giving away the ending, which is all of like 3 pages. Really, the ending is like all of 3 pages. But overall, I found the book enjoyable. I think that it's a very important piece of Appendix N literature, since it is the first self-referential piece, right, of Appendix N. It is the first book that references D&D on a list. The author of whom is on a list of people that helped inspire D&D to begin with. So I think that's really neat. Yes, the concepts in it weren't necessarily influential to the game, but to gaming as a whole, this book is kind of a big deal, I think.
And it really was a throwback to what you guys would know as the BX. I mean, after playing a little bit of that, the archetypes were dead on, and I look forward to seeing some incarnations of those characters in some DCC stuff later, especially from our third-party people.
Yes, and we will avoid seeing versions of those characters in Return to Quag Keep because we've read the reviews.
Now.
So I do though. I think that will cover us for.
I think we're past our mark. We should probably head out.
Yeah, but thank you everyone for joining us over in the chat. It is it's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and I guess we're doing St. Clair / Idris Seabright, quite possibly Shadow People, because Gronk Healy Man really wanted to read that soon. So.
Well, that would work.
Who am I to say no to Gronk Healy Man?
That's going to fall on February 15th.
February 15th. Ooh, the day after Valentine's Day.
So anyone in the doghouse can come visit us. We're cool with that. We might have more people on with us next time. Who knows? This has been kind of fun.
Yeah.
And with that, we will go ahead and sign off. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you guys for showing up. And we will chat with you shortly. And Bob, it's your line.
Well, the show, of course, will be available for replay on Twitch and YouTube. The audio will come through Sanctum. And until we meet again, be inspired.